appears that this is the year of Dexter. We're getting 2 different seasons in 2025. The prequel series Original Sin, which is currently airing, and the continuation Resurrection, which is coming this summer. With all of that in mind, it seemed like the right year to finally do a deep dive into each season. With that in mind, I'm kicking things off, of course, with Season 1. Hi, my name is Sean, and I love to talk about movies and TV way too much. With that in mind, go ahead and join me down below in the comment section. Share your spoiler-filled thoughts on Dexter Season 1. This is a spoiler review, so feel free to spoil away down below in the comment section. No need for a spoiler warning. If you haven't seen Dexter yet, you can watch it on Paramount+. It's currently on Netflix. There's many places to watch it, and if you want to watch a show about a serial killer that kills serial killers, it is a really good, dark comedy. Not every season is fantastic. There are some very frustrating points in time, but when it's good, it's great. It's one of the best shows of the 21st century, hence why I wanted to do a series reviewing each of the seasons, doing a deep dive into it, and it's just a show that I'm kind of always looking for an excuse to rewatch the good seasons of the show. Now, just to give my background with Dexter, I first started watching it right after Season 4 ended. Now, I didn't start it there. I went back to the beginning, but well, maybe I shouldn't say this, but I was a youth pastor at the time, and a couple of my students came in depressed one Sunday. One of them you might be familiar with, Andy, who's in a lot of videos over on my main channel, came in looking kind of depressed. Like, hey, what's wrong, guys? Like, oh, just got done watching the latest season of Dexter. So I'm like, okay, I don't know what that means, but they were really bummed out, and they're like, oh man, the show's fantastic, but man, sometimes it hits you really hard. You're like, okay, I don't know what that means, but was curious, decided to check out the show, and I've been a fan for the last 15 years now, which is weird to think that I've been watching the show for 15 years. And like I said, man, has it disappointed me at times, but when it's good, it is some of the best television, I guess I would say, of all time. One more thing, Dexter is based off of a book. I have listened to the first Dexter book on Audible, and you can get a free 30-day trial of Audible and a free audiobook of your choice, including a Dexter book, at audibletrial.com/Sean Chandler. I am a massive fan of Audible, and I have been for about 10 years now. I'm constantly listening to audiobooks, and one of the books that I have listened to is the book that kicked off the Dexter franchise, and Season 1 is based off of the first book, so it's really interesting to see all the ways in which they're very similar, all the things that they added to expand out the season, and just kind of the origins of where this very popular show came from. If you want to dive into that, I do recommend checking it out, and you can do so for free at audibletrial.com/Sean Chandler with a free trial of Audible. With all of that said, let's get started with our review. And simply put, right out of the gate, Dexter is just a great concept for a show and a lead character. There's just this very solid hook. The concept of a serial killer that hunts down serial killers. It's kind of a fun, interesting concept. And then it packages it in this police procedural context. So it takes a familiar genre where there's, a zillion TV shows on network television over the last 50 years in this genre, and just does something so wildly different with it, where it's able to go to really dark places, very funny places, because of this spin on the genre. It has all the beats that you want from a police procedural, but there's so much more in there as well. And a big part of that is it's a show that is just oozes style. It's set in a fun city of Miami, and it leans into that. While it is very dark, it is also very funny. It has a quirky vibe to it, and you feel that right out of the gate, where you get the opening credit sequence, which it's him waking up and flossing his teeth and making his eggs and putting a shirt on, and all of it is done with these secondary innuendos to every image. All of the sound effects in the opening sequence are designed to remind you of what he actually does with his life, and it's a perfect metaphor for what the show is. All of it with this catchy little upbeat, quirky song playing. That's what the show does so well. Balancing that tone of it is about a cold-blooded killer, but it's funny and it's charming. And right out of the gate, they got that. They captured it. All those different ingredients. And we'll talk about it later on, how season 1 does have some rough edges, and they were figuring out how to kind of balance all of the pieces that they were trying to work with on the show. But they got all of the most important pieces in place and had a really interesting story to tell for this Dexter character, and had the right entry point to go into the adventures of the world of Dexter. Season 1 is Dexter at its purest version, where, we're seeing him in kind of full swing of him comfortable with his life as a serial killer, trying to find the people that fit the code that he can take out and he can kill. But we don't have to introduce him being chased. We don't have to turn everything on its head or anything like that, because it's the original version. So he works with the police, or he's one of the police doing these investigations. We get to introduced to his love life and all these different things. And really, this first season is where you start to introduce things complicating that world. But because we're just in this pure version, he's not married yet. All these things that come later on, where the changes a little bit, people start to discover things and complicate things that add layers, and you got to change up the formula. Right. But that's why this is the purest season, without any of that. It's just him doing his thing and kind of discovering who he is. And that's one of the things that I think makes the specific story. We'll dive into the other characters in a little bit. Let's kick it off with the talking story on here. The kind of the way the first book, as well as this season, are structured is it's like a really clever way to do an origin story. That we're 15 years into Dexter doing his thing, or over 10 years, I don't know the exact timeline, but he's been the Bay Harbor Butcher, following the code for a long time, and he's cool with it. He's got a job, he's got a girlfriend, he doesn't, necessarily think this girlfriend will last forever or anything like that, but he's happy with what's kind of going on there, and all these things are dandy. So, on the one hand, it's very established, but because of who the ice truck killer is and what the ice truck killer's mission is, it's this subversive origin story that Dexter himself discovers all along the way. And the first half of the season, or really, up until almost the very end of the season, we are learning Dexter's understanding of his backstory, of how Harry Morgan raised him with this code and had his concerns, and how he trained him to control his urges as his dark passenger and put it on a specific path. And we're given this overly simplistic understanding of Dexter's upbringing. That's what we're given from Dexter himself. But Dexter himself believes it. He took everything at face value and had never kind of dug deeper into it. And so he's just totally fine with what's kind of going on with his life. But he doesn't know that there's a brother out there, and he doesn't know all of the skeletons, sometimes almost literal, in Harry's closet that would change everything. So Ice Truck Killer comes in and starts toying with him. And through all of this, Dexter starts to discover things and feel things he's never felt before, and remembers things he's never remembered before. So he discovers his own origin story of why he is this monster, as we discover why he is this really fun, entertaining monster that makes for a great show. And that's when you find an interesting way to do it. Tell your story. That we're in the middle of it. We get going right from the get-go. He's off. Opening scene of the show. Tracks someone down. Follows the code. Does the whole deal. Doesn't feel like we're watching the origin story, but we are. and we don't even know it until the end of the season. You outsmarted me. You did something smarter than what I would have come up with, and we went somewhere I was not expecting. That's when you're doing something really cool with your show, and you can have a character that's very established at where he's at and what he's doing. And that's why it's so fun. He's right there, right from the get-go doing it. He's a serial killer, and we're rooting for him. But we're still growing the character, and he changes throughout the season, and he discovers how broken he is. And you go throughout the season, and you realize little ways in which he becomes more human. That at the beginning, almost all of his emotions feel very phony and fake. And that's the way he presents himself. It's all a facade of the serial killer's the real me, and everything else is just the pretend so I can be the serial killer. And you get to the next to last episode when he realizes that Deb is in danger, and there's a true desperation there. There's actual concern for someone. Rita at the beginning is just his pretend girlfriend to have a life, and by the end of it, he's like actually cares and wants to help, and he's invested. Even at times, like in raising the kids and Paul, when that's going on there, he oversteps boundaries because he has feelings. He has his own processing of his own childhood and what Harry kept from him. He applies now over to what she's doing with her kids because he actually has feelings, and it means something. It's not just playing pretend to make sure that no one thinks something's up. He actually cares. And so they find this way to take the killer. He's just as much of a killer at the end of the season as he at the beginning. We're not trying to make Dexter less of a killer, but we find the humanity in this psycho, and it does it really well through his concern for his sister, even though the way that we get to the end of it, and he kills his own brother, and it's devastating for him. He kills all the time, and it's fun. It's like his addiction. It's the thing that he has to do, and finally he has to kill someone because he needs to. This is the right thing to do. This guy is evil. This guy is a true monster, and suddenly there's no joy in it, and it's like it suddenly sees the other side of things a little bit, and that peaks of humanity start to come out with him. That's really cool. And then once again, with Rudy, you have a character that represents what the worst possible version of Dexter could be. That Rudy also pretends to be normal, pretends to have a relationship with Deborah, pretends to have a career, pretends to do all of this stuff. But he's truly unfeeling and pure evil. It's all the worst version of it. That's unfeeling, unrestrained, and views that as a good thing. And so it's just like the mirror storytelling, mirror characters, all that really cool stuff that just really enjoyed about it. Just kind of rewinding back a little bit, diving through specific characters. So much of what makes this just like a legendary show is Dexter, Michael C. Hall, just so good. And especially as you go throughout the season, you start to realize how good he really is. That he shows up and you believe that it's a little bit of the Clark Kent Superman thing and this twisted other version, but when it's done right with like Christopher Reeve, him playing Clark Kent versus him playing Superman, about the way he moves, just the basic default of his face changes between Clark Kent and Superman. There's just a confidence that appears there. And when he's in Michael C. Hall, when we're in Dexter, and he's doing pretend goofy Dexter mode, his facade is this very goofy, nerdy person. There's awkwardness, and there's something there that can be spotted that Dokes sees. We'll get to Dokes in just a second, that absolute legend. There's something weird there, but he comes off as so harmless, so goofy, and so nerdy. and you buy it. You see him and you go, what a like goober that's into really nerdy stuff and kind of detached and creepy for that reason. And with just like these changes in his face, the real Dexter comes out. And just having watched the last 2 episodes last night, rewatching them, when Dokes follows Dexter to the shipping containers and he confronts him, and there's this moment Dokes slams him up against the wall, and in this moment it's like Dexter's finally like, all right, I'm gonna let him see who I really am. And you just see a different character, and he reveals the dark passenger version of him right there to Dokes. In his just eyes, his demeanor is so different. And you can't like exactly pinpoint what is it that makes him look so goofy in the lab with everybody else. And then he just has this little smirk in his face. There's something in there where you just believe that this is a twisted killer. And he can do both, and he can transition from one to the other. And having that little moment where he like just does it right in front of Dokes, and immediately it's like Dokes knows I'm dealing with someone that's probably just as dangerous and deadly as I am. I don't know who this guy, I don't know what this is, but it just reveals it. And it's all in the, like that little stuff in the face. In addition to that, he can just be really funny, both in through the writing and the delivery, whether in the goofy moments where the goofiness is hiding the dark thought that he has, or in the serious moments being allowed to be dark, but also allow the silly into very dark moments. Goes back and forth between the two things, and it's so good at it. All right, we got other characters in here. I adore Dokes on this show. I think he's just so funny. He gets all of these just amazing lines all throughout the season of just roasting Dexter, going after him. And it's something that, because us as the audience, we know who Dexter really is, the show can get away with having a character be horrible to our lead. And we can allow him to be a bully towards our lead. And the whole time we're like, Dokes is a jerk. But he's right. Like, it's all like, you're not like, wow, man, why is Dokes doing this? Dokes is doing this because he's the one person that can figure out something is seriously wrong with this very creepy, weird guy. He doesn't know what it is, but we do, so he can get away with it. And there's something very fun about a dynamic where a character is able to be so aggressive towards your lead character and going after them constantly, and you don't blame them because they're not wrong. And I think the performance is on point, just everything about it, just like great, hilarious stuff. Everything that Dokes does, I have so much fun with it. Like, you can kind of go throughout the whole cast. Like, there's not like a weak spot in the cast. That's where, like, you go throughout the show, and some characters don't make it all the way to the end, but most of them do, and they're all pretty well defined early on, and you like them. Whether it's Batista is just like the friend in the office that's just like the guy that's the helpless romantic, but that doesn't mean that he's successful in his love life, and just like a good supportive friend. I think, of course, Deborah, just like right out of the gate, you understand who she is, and she remains true to that throughout the show. Like, they got the characters right at the beginning. They weren't like trying to figure out, what do we do with these? Like, they got it. They knew who they wanted them to be, and they're all distinct on the show. They all bring something unique to the, in like the vibe that you're going for. And they'll bring something different out of Dexter. They'll relate to him different. So it's like a good ensemble. Everyone pulls their weight. The one, and then like Rita, just like finding the right person that has her own like mini arc of finding her confidence throughout the season. And it's like one episode at a time, she gets a little bit more confident, comes out a little bit more, and you buy the growth that she has. She's intentionally not super flashy and interesting. That's the whole point. But that doesn't make her less compelling. And how normal she is what is the that's what makes the connection with Dexter so interesting, because he's such a dark, complicated character. And not that she has her own complications in her life, but she's living a fairly normal life in many ways. And seeing him relate in that context is exactly what makes it interesting. The one character that I would say they were really struggling to know what to do with all throughout the season was LaGuerta, where, like, in the first episode, she's like hitting on Dexter and totally insufferable in her treatment of Deborah. And you're like, what is going on here? And then they kind of try to make her much more sympathetic when you get into like episode 4, where she makes a mistake and she like owns it. Like, she realizes, oh crap, someone's in danger because of my politics and my antics. Okay, I need to make this right. And so they give her a little bit of humanity, but they're like the whole kind of season, like are we rooting for her or are we not? And towards the end, where she's having the political stuff with the captain, and you start to see her good qualities, and you start to like, she doesn't come off likable the way the other characters do, but you can see where she actually does care. She plays politics. She has bad, like, they start to find it, who she is and her role on the show better towards the very end of the show. And as that happens, it's also as they're like messing with her and replacing her and stuff. So it's, they're you can tell that she was the character that I think they were most like figuring her out and her role in the show and her connection to Dexter as it went along. But yeah, overall, I mean, I just think like a show of television where they really nailed everything that needed to work, which there's a great concept, a great style. They got the cast and the characters, and they balanced the darkness, the humor, the horror, all kind of just about right to do something that obviously has cut through. That here we are almost 20 years later, and 2 new seasons are coming out because people just keep connecting with this show. Now, all that said, I do think there's a couple things in here that are more on the negative side, so we'll kind of talk about this. But the whole first season, or at least the first half of the first season, maybe is a better way to phrase it, felt like a pilot season where they were figuring out, how do we do this? The first episode, I don't know the specific, if there's too much background on it, but it feels like a true pilot episode that was probably shot 9 months before the rest of the show, and they went, that worked, let's order this. And then they kept the episode as is. So there's a number of things about the first episode that just feel different. Even you watch the opening scene and his kill process, even the kind of the performance during the kill, it's all different. The code, everything is a little bit different. And there's a number of things like that. And LaGuerta is like hot for Dexter. They just felt like they're figuring it out. And maybe adding to some of this is that the first season is the only season of the show that is very directly pulled from the story of one of the books, the first book. And the first episode basically covers the first half of the book. That what closes out episode 1, that's pretty deep into the book. And so then the rest of the episodes, 11 episodes, cover the back half of the book. So it's like heavy adaptation at the very beginning, and then a lot of going deeper and expanding things and figuring things out. So there's some subplots about Dokes and him having an affair and him not being, like, the police not liking him. And then there's another one about Dokes getting in, like, shooting someone. There's like, feels like there's these, a lot of them about Dokes, but these subplots that feel like they don't really go anywhere. It's like, feels like a really big deal, and then it's like, all right, let's move on. This doesn't actually matter. And so whether that was padding, whether that was them figuring things out, I don't really know all of it, what it meant, but there's a couple of those things that are kind of rough edges of them figuring out, how do you do this show? What does it look like? And even kind of balancing out how much is about individual Dexter taking out some person this week? How much is the big story that ties into the book? Where are we going to expand things? All that. So you can feel them ironing out the kinks and finding all of it. Sometimes that's what makes for a fun first season. Back to what I said earlier, it's the purest form of Dexter. They were kind of figuring it out. It wasn't a well-oiled machine, but they got all the important pieces right. Everything that mattered works in the first season. And that's why it was able to become so successful, because they went, okay, wow, this thing actually works. Now, where do we go with this? And so, huge fan of the first season. It is one of the best seasons of the show. And given that I think it's one of the best shows of the 21st century, it's also one of the better seasons of the 21st century. And just a great concept, great style, and they got all the right pieces right. So, massive fan of this season. Let me know your thoughts down below in the comments section. I did a ranking back when New Blood came out. You can hear my thoughts on all of the seasons right over there. I do plan to release one of these reviews every couple of weeks or every month until the new season drops, so be on the lookout for more of those. I'll have them link, whatever, all that fun stuff. Hey, thank you so much for watching, and keep talking movies and TV to